The Vietnam War was a tough time for America, and the soldiers that had to go through it had to go through horrible conditions while they were there. American soldiers were often young men. They got drafted. Because of this, they had no idea what they were up against. The Vietnam terrain was covered in jungles with booby traps and really dense brush. The weather was always hot and humid, and there were various dangerous animals that lived in the forest. A lot of soldiers ended up getting ill before the violence even started. In addition, the American government had underestimated the Vietnamese army and did not realize how strong they were. The Vietnamese had a complex network of underground tunnels that made it hard for the U.S. to even find them. The U.S. soldiers would have to be extremely careful, even around women and children, because the Vietnamese mothers would give their children bombs and send them at the American soldiers. This forced the soldiers to kill civilians even if they weren't sure that they were really the enemy. The U.S. soldiers could not have tents because they were too much weight to carry, so instead they would build cocoons from trees if that was even available. Soldiers would contract diseases like jungle rot from the conditions in the jungle and then would die from it. The soldiers were not prepared for surviving in the jungle because in their 8 weeks of basic training, they did not learn how to survive the conditions of the jungle like they should have. Most of the food they ate was rations because the soldiers did not have camps to prepare food in. Soldiers had to walk through thick jungles, swamps, and flooded rice paddies. While doing this, the soldiers were prone to malaria, leeches, and 30 different kinds of venomous snakes. Because of the severe trauma, up to 80% of some combat units were regular drug users. During the dry season, each soldier had to carry a minimum of 6 one-quart canteens to get to the next resupply, which could take 3 to 4 days. Because of the muddy conditions, soldiers' clothes would become stiff and get ripped by the vines and plants of the jungle. But even if they got ripped, soldiers would not be resupplied with clothes for a whole month. After this month was over, soldiers had a small 3-day break in which they could shower and do what they pleased. On top of all of this, when the soldiers got home from the war, they faced tough criticism from the U.S. population. Protesters would meet them in airports and wave signs at them and scream at them and call them baby killers because they had heard about how they were having to kill the civilians. Even though they did not realize that these civilians were trying to kill them and giving their kids explosives and sending them at them, they still faced tough criticism from all these protesters and did not receive the same respect that people from other wars would when they returned home. And overall, the Vietnam War was a really tough time for these soldiers. They were not prepared for anything that they had to go through in the jungle or how they were supposed to survive in the jungle, and it was just a really tough time for these soldiers.